Hello everyone, this is John Myers from the KICKER Training Department. We're going to put in this KICKER key amplifier. This amplifier is going to take your system to its fullest potential. We're going to show you just how easy it is to put this amplifier in. We've already done a little research on this vehicle. We know the factory amplifier is under the seat. We've also done some research on the internet and determined what speaker wires feed each speaker so we know where to grab signal and how to feed the speakers. We've also determined that the key amplifier is going to fit directly on top of the factory amplifier without interfering with the seat. So let's begin the installation process and show you just how easy it really is. The 180 watt key amplifier is extremely efficient, but for best results we want to run a power wire through the firewall away from the exhaust manifold and up to the power connection of the battery. Make sure you have a fuse holder that's within 18 inches of the battery and leave this fuse out till the final step before we power up the amplifier. Let's go ahead and connect the power. This is the input harness for the key amplifier. If you notice, it's terminated with RCA ends. To make it much easier to connect speaker level to the input of the key amplifier, which is recommended, we're going to use the KICKER KISL. This will give you an RCA to speaker adapter that's a much easier connection to make. This can be directly connected to the amplifier's factory harness, and then the RCAs can directly plug right into the key's input. As you can see, we've connected the KISL to the speaker output of the factory amplifier. We made sure to observe the polarity, positive and negative, for each of the speakers to know that we have the polarity correct. It is very important to do so with the key amplifier for the proper staging. Next, we'll take the input harness and plug the left and right inputs to the harness into the KISL as shown. Make sure left and right polarity is also correct. The other two inputs are for a 4-channel mode. Since we're running biamp mode, these will not be used in this installation, but would be used if you're running front, rear, left, and right. We'll tuck these out of the way for safekeeping. If you'll notice, all the connections are finalized and terminated. We've taken care to tape the RCA connections to make sure these don't accidentally get pulled apart since they'll be mounted under the seat, and these connections were taped off to make sure they don't inadvertently contact any metal and cause engine noise. Next, we'll grab the output harness. If you'll notice, the output harness also contains the power connections, which we'll connect last. It also has the 4 speaker outputs. Once again, when you connect the speaker outputs from the key amplifier to the factory harness, observe proper polarity to make sure everything functions properly. The input harness to the key amplifier is now complete. The output harness is now connected to the front speaker outputs to the dash, which is on the first harness of the factory amplifier. The door speakers are connected to the second harness. These harnesses are now complete. All the bare wires are taped up neatly so they don't make contact. Now we can plug these into the amplifier, and all that's left to do is connect the power wires, and we're ready to go. The ground wire has been properly attached to the frame. The power wire has been safely routed through the vehicle, and the fuse is still removed. We'll go ahead and connect those to the input power harness of the key amplifier. The blue wire would be used if we're using a 12-volt turn-on. Since we're using DC offset, which is supplied from the factory amplifier through the speaker leads, this wire will not be necessary. If you're using a true RCA output with an aftermarket head unit, you will have to hook up the switched blue input.
It will be much easier to set the dip switches with the amplifier out of the vehicle before it's mounted. The first switch is turn-on mode. Select 12 volts if you're using an RCA level input from an aftermarket head unit and a separate 12-volt turn-on lead. On this vehicle, we are using speaker level input, so we will select it to DC offset mode. The second switch is the fader switch. We want to set it off so it will send signal to all 4 channels with a 2-channel left and right input. The third switch is a compressor that will limit distortion. We will leave it off for now. If the compressor circuit is engaged, these indicators will illuminate when the key's output is being reduced. The fourth switch is biamp mode. We want to make sure we have it turned on because we are biamping the front speakers only in this vehicle. If we are running 4-channel mode with front and rear speakers, we would want to select it to off. Next, we have the KICKER EQ switch. Leave it engaged if you want a subtle bass and treble boost. For now, we will leave it engaged. The next switch is the time delay mode built into the key. If the car has factory time delay, you may want to defeat the key's time delay for better center image. The last 2 switches control the high-pass crossover. They can be set to 60, 80, or 120 Hz at 24 dB per octave if you wish. Next up is the radio detect button. If you have a modern factory smart radio and you're using the speaker level outputs to send signal to the key, you may need to engage the switch to prevent your factory radio from shutting down or throwing a trouble code. After the setup is complete, the gains can be adjusted for both amp 1 and 2 independently.
As you can see, the power wires are all taped off to prevent moisture from getting into the connections should something spill under the seat. Now all we have to do is grab the key amplifier and mount the amplifier. We're going to mount this with Velcro since it's much easier to mount this way. Plug in the harnesses. There, all the power connections are made. Now all we need to do is plug in the microphone, put the seat back in place, and go through setup after we put the fuse back in the power harness under the hood. Now that all the connections have been made inside the vehicle to the key amplifier, the final thing to do before you run the setup process is insert the fuse and the fuse holder on the power wire by the battery. Before we start the pink noise track, it's very important to make sure the equalizer is set completely flat. And in this application, since we're only tuning the front speakers, we need to move the fader clear to the front to make sure the rear speakers are not playing. If the rear speakers are playing during setup, they're not running through the key amplifier, this will cause the amplifier to fail the setup process. The key is completely hooked up and we've turned it on to verify that all 4 speakers that are connected to the key are functioning properly. The plug to the rear speakers has been disconnected because we only want to play the speakers that are running through the key for the setup procedure. Now we'll take the microphone that's included with the key and the rubber strap. We're going to place it on top of the driver's headrest as facing vertical as possible to set up the tuning process. Everything's all set up. The radio is now powered up. Pink noise is loaded. All we need to do next is make sure we're in a quiet environment. All the windows are shut in the vehicle. No air conditioning's running anywhere. No outside noises. We're going to push the startup button once I turn on the pink noise to a moderate level. And when I start hear beeps, I'll have 10 seconds to shut the door and let it go through a setup process. So let's go. You've just heard the happy tones. That means everything worked great. Now all we need to do is push the setup button one more time. That takes it out of the setup mode. Pink noise begins to play once again, telling me everything is tuned. Now all we need to do is unplug the microphone, jump in and enjoy. See you on the road.